And then he learns differently. He learns what he's told to learn and the way he's told to learn it. And this is a system. This is an organized method of learning. Now, of course, this is not to toss out all order and organization. If you're doing a home school, you want to have some order in the day. But the child doesn't get to exercise his curiosity, his natural inquisitiveness, learning and studying things that he desires to learn and study. No. This system now needs to put him in place, and we've seen the results. We go from 98% of them being creative geniuses at age 3 to 5 to at age 25, only 2% being creative geniuses. It's virtually wiping out creativity from almost 100% to almost 0%. So no matter whether you're in school or whether you're homeschooled or whatever, the more time you spend outside of the classroom doing real things, studying, thinking, learning practical skills, living life, serving others, doing things the way God designed it, the more happy children and youth are. Now, people might say, in our 21st century age, things are different than they used to be. Watch this with the 21st century technology. This is amazing. The man on the screen that you see is Sugata Mitra. And he did an interesting experiment in Indian villages in India, the most poor communities. And he put these computers in public places. And with the internet. And the children flocked to these things to figure out how to use them and to learn. They're naturally wanting to learn. They're inquisitive, right? And kids who did not know how to read were totally ignorant. They now learned how to read on their own with each other at the screens. And not just that, they learned things like about microorganisms and viruses and bacteria, and they started talking about this in their community. You have to wonder if schooling as we know it is becoming obsolete and not completely. I don't want to toss out the concept of a school institution because, we've been given a pretty good blueprint for that as the people of God, which we will talk about in the upcoming seminar, Undoctrinated. But here's an example, Mr. Mitra and the Indian children that I really appreciate. Over half a century ago, though, Robert Ulrich warned his fellow social planners, and he said, watch out, guys. We are producing more and more people who will be dissatisfied because the artificially prolonged time of formal schooling will arouse in them hopes which society cannot fulfill. So kids are going to be told, if you just stay in school, if you get the degree, if you go to college, if you do these things, then you will be successful. And he says, be careful. These hopes are not going to be fulfilled, and they're going to be disappointed. Over 72% of students who have finished college over the past few years in America have had to move back with their parents, strapped with tens of thousands of dollars of student loan debt. 35% of college students say that they regret the time and money spent on the 4 years of college. Over half of them say, I pretty much learned nothing that was useful. So Robert Ulrich's statement is being fulfilled today. And Abraham Lincoln, if we go back into the mid-19th century, he taught and believed that literally every person was capable of developing an independent livelihood, being a proprietor, being an initiator, doing something with your life where you're not just dependent upon others. He believed that being a laborer, a wage laborer, was a temporary condition on the path to doing something for yourself. And that sounds maybe so impossible, like we can't all do that. Is it impossible? Take a look at the Amish. The Amish today, almost 100% of them, are proprietors of small farms or enterprises. Almost 100%. And their businesses have only a 5% rate of failure, compared with American businesses, which are 85% rate of failure. Almost all businesses, startups, fail. The Amish, almost all of them succeed. And they were not given this success on a platter, a silver platter, by the way. They have faced unbelievable odds. Governments have tried to destroy their way of life, yet the Amish live prosperous lives. And they're not perfect. I'm not saying we should be like them or join them and they're the model and standard for everybody. But the interesting thing is, their society is virtually crime-free, divorce-free. They're not on welfare. Yet none of them have gotten even a high school diploma, let alone a college degree. They learn academically, they do, and through the 8th grade. But during this time, they're also learning practical things about real life. In the last century in America, we've seen the family has been destroyed. We have become dumber, we are dependent, and we are spiritually empty. So I have to wonder, maybe the Amish are a lot closer to the goal than the rest of us. This man you see on the screen is named Carroll Quigley. He's a very important individual because as a scholar, he was given the opportunity to study the secret records and the files and papers of the organizations of the elite. And he wrote sort of the textbook on what you might say is the movement of the elite in the 20th century, the New World Order movement, you might call it. The book is called Tragedy and Hope. And actually, Bill Clinton referred to Carroll Quigley in his acceptance speech for the Democratic National Convention when he was nominated as the candidate for the presidency in 1992. He says, I learned a lot from my mentor, Carroll Quigley. Well, what does Carroll Quigley have to say? In this book, he talks about, the movement of the elite and so on, and that's interesting. But he also had a speech. Right before his death, he gave a speech in 1976. And in his speech, he said the following: "Now I come to my last statement. The final result will be that the American people will ultimately opt out of the system. Today, everything is a bureaucratic structure, and brainwashed people who are not personalities are trained to fit into this bureaucratic structure and say it is a great life. The process of opting out will take a long time. When Rome fell, the Christian answer was create our own communities." And that's what we can do, and that's what we've done. We can say, why do we need to be a part of that system? Opt out. Create our own communities. It's still legal. I don't know for how much longer, but millions of Americans have just said, we're just going to educate our children at home and in the community. Don't waste your time trying to reform the schools, by the way. If you're looking at this, the schools must change. I learned a lot about the history of, you're not going to change the system. Just opt out and say we don't need to be brainwashed, as Carroll Quigley put it. The same applies with the way you view Hollywood. You might have seen Media on the Brain and said, we're going to shut down Hollywood. Let's wage a culture war. You know what? You can shut down Hollywood by unplugging it from your own home. You can say, we're going to toss out all these video games. We're going to toss out the schooling, brainwashing nonsense. We can take control of our own lives. If you're not happy with the medical system and the philosophy that's happening in medicine in America, well, study natural remedies, live a healthful life, and do things differently on your own, in your home, with your own communities, your own church. This is the beauty of living life God's way. You don't have to be victims of this system. Now, these 2 sessions that we've finished now have only been for the very limited the purpose of exposing the facade of modern schooling. What's really under the surface? What are the roots of it? But there is still a lot more that needs to be said. How do we opt out? What do we do instead? And so for the sequel of Schooled, be sure to take a look at Undoctrinated. How do we do true education? Whether at home or whether on a school campus. I can't wait to do this seminar because we've just torn down the edifice. Let's build up something beautiful and wonderful that God has inspired us with. We'll look at the history of the homeschool movement. We'll look at the Adventist education blueprint and we'll say, wow, this is such a cool alternative to the mind programming, the Prussianization, and the Jesuitization of American schooling that has taken place in the last 100 years. We will be inspired to do something beautiful. But don't stick around for that. Study it for yourself. Read education. Read Fundamentals of Christian Education. Read counsels to parents, teachers, and students. And do something different. Let's close with prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you so much for a beautiful vision of how we are to train and educate our children. I pray that as we move forward from opting out of the enemy's plan and system, that we can look to you with obedience, with faith, and with a hope of something beautiful and wonderful, your soon coming. And Lord, we know we must be prepared by having minds that can think and discern. And we know that the enemy of souls, the powers of darkness, seek to gain control of the human mind.